Hello, amigos! Your favorite speech-impaired motorcycle instructor is back, and today we are looking at some of the worst beginner rider mistakes. The kind that causes new riders to crash left, right and center. We are going to break down how these mistakes happen, why people make them, and most importantly, what can we do in order to never accidentally do them ourselves. The first treacherous mistake happens when a rider tries to brake quickly, but at the same time fails to close the throttle completely. It's a classic recipe for a good old low side like this.
Yo, slow down, man! Oh my god! Oh my... Yo! What the bro? Yo! Fam, I was menace! Great, dog. Like, what the
Don't worry, dog, I will explain how it happened. Here's how it usually goes down. The rider opens the throttle like this, cruising along just fine, when suddenly he needs to brake. Naturally, our rider tries to brake as fast as he can, so he hastily reaches the brake lever, without realizing that he didn't close the throttle completely. And then, boom! Head a layer down, brother! Even on modern bikes with fancy ABS systems that are supposed to save the day by cutting the throttle, I had a few instances when my students made this mistake, and while they didn't drop the bike because of ABS intervention, they simply ended up with 2 times longer stopping distance, which is a lot longer than we want when we are performing an emergency braking. So, how do we fix this? Some of you guys can say, "Oh, I know! Just pull in the clutch, right?" We pull in the clutch and cut the power to the rear wheel, which means we can twist the throttle all we want without it actually doing anything. Well, yes, we can, but that introduces other problems, which we talked about in our How to use the clutch while braking video not long ago. When we pull in the clutch during braking, we can lock up the rear wheel easier, we lose engine braking, and we risk a high side if we are braking mid-corner. So, instead of pulling in the clutch, let's find a better solution. What we can do instead is we can develop a new grip on the throttle, which will force us to close it when we reach for the front brake. Here's how it works. Instead of simply gripping the throttle like this and twisting it, we can do it slightly differently. Put your hand on the throttle in such a way that the palm lays on the throttle, fingers are on the front brake lever and the wrist is flat. This is now a default position on the throttle. Now look, if we open the throttle, we can't just grab the brake at the same time. Our wrist is in the wrong position for that. When we go for the brake, our wrist has to rotate down, automatically closing the throttle before we can grab the lever. Accidentally, the same kind of grip on the throttle also helps to prevent another major beginner mistake, a so-called whiskey throttle. Whiskey throttle happens when the rider grabs the throttle like this, opens it, the bike starts to accelerate, throwing the rider's body back, which makes him open the throttle even more. Now, the bike just accelerates uncontrollably and the rider can't release the throttle because he holds onto it for dear life. Using the throttle grip we just talked about helps to avoid this. With our wrist flat, if we give it too much gas and get thrown back, our hand naturally closes the throttle instead of opening it. So, this throttle grip is much more foolproof than if we grab the throttle with our wrists high. But that's not all. This grip works great with how our body moves on the bike. When we quickly accelerate, our body tends to be thrown back. We can counter this by leaning our body forward just before opening the throttle. Under braking, it's the opposite. Because of inertia, our body tends to be thrown forward, so we can counter this by leaning back. As a bonus, this also significantly improves our braking from higher speeds due to aerodynamic drag. Now check out an interesting side effect. When we lean forward, our elbows naturally go down, and if we use our new throttle grip, it puts our throttle hand in a very comfortable and natural position. And when we need to brake, we lean our body back, which pretty much automatically closes the throttle, and we can safely apply the front brake. Great! Now let's transform all this new knowledge into muscle memory by performing a very simple and straightforward exercise. Find yourself an empty stretch of the road where nobody will bother you. Put the bike in the first gear, use the grip on the throttle which we discussed, and do this. Lean forward and gradually open the throttle so you have a nice powerful acceleration. Next, lean back while simultaneously completely closing the throttle and gradually but firmly apply the front brake. Don't touch the rear brake or clutch, because they are not a focus of this exercise. Just concentrate on what are you doing with the front brake and the throttle. You should end up with something like this: short but rather quick accelerations and decelerations. Try this for a while and you will quickly develop a good muscle memory with your throttle and front brake. And you will never find yourself doing a whiskey throttle or low siding because you didn't close the throttle completely while braking. Another very common beginner mistake is snatching the front brake. If you've ever watched crash compilations here on YouTube, you've probably seen this happen over and over again. A rider panics, grabs the front brake too fast and ends up low siding, which is often followed by "I had to lay it down" punchline. The issue with snatching the front brake is that when we brake, the bike's weight naturally shifts forward onto the front wheel. The harder we brake, the more weight shifts to the front, sometimes so much that the rear wheel lifts off the ground. This forward weight transfer is why the front brake can deliver such powerful stopping force. It is designed to handle it. But this weight shift doesn't happen instantly. If we just stop the front brake at full force right away, the front tire won't have enough grip and it will skid. Instead, if we apply the brake gradually and smoothly and build up to full force, the front tire gets loaded with more and more weight progressively, giving it more traction. This provides tons of grip and allows the front brake to stop the bike quickly and safely, without laying her down. Now, on the flip side, some riders are so terrified of flipping over the handlebars or skidding the front tire that they just don't use the front brake at all. Or they use it very little, relying on the rear brake instead. This is a big mistake. The front brake provides more than 90% of our stopping power. By using only the rear brake, our bike has 2 to 3 times longer stopping distance than if we use the front brake. If something dangerous happens in front of us, like a car pulling out or stopping suddenly, we simply won't be able to stop in time without the front brake. That's why it is very important to get really proficient with the front brake as soon as possible. Are you tired of freezing on your motorcycle like a human popsicle? Or sweating so much you might as well be riding in the Sahara Desert? Cold, hot, you shouldn't care, because you are equipped with Ultramax Cell. Made with advanced 3D structure polypropylene fiber, Ultramax Cell thermal underwear wicks away moisture and cools you down before you can say evaporative cooling. When you are freezing cold, the honeycomb structure keeps an extra layer of air around your body, keeping you warm. Ultramax Cell. Your ride, your comfort, your destiny. Check the link below. Another common mistake is dragging the rear brake. New riders often think they should always keep their foot hovering over the brake pedal, just to be safe and be ready to brake at any moment. But here is the problem. Unlike on cars, where we usually have a rather firm brake pedal, which is quite easy to feel, the bike's brake pedal normally is much softer. It is not so easy to feel it, especially in motorcycle boots. Constant hovering over the rear brake often leads to a rider dragging the rear brake without even realizing it. Like in this example. Obviously, this overheats and wears out the rear brake really fast. It is usually a better practice to do all the braking you need and move the foot back onto the foot peg until you need braking once again. Also, you can cover the brakes when you're approaching a potentially dangerous situation, where you might need brakes. Like for example, it's a good practice to cover your brakes when crossing an intersection, but it is not the best idea to drag the rear brake constantly. Another mistake which new riders tend to make is constantly pulling in the clutch. Need to slow down? Pull in the clutch. Need to turn? Pull in the clutch. Feel like your bike is about to tip over? Pull in the clutch. Not sure what you want to have for dinner tonight? Pull in the clutch too. Apparently, it's a solution for everything. This happens because of how new riders are trained in beginner courses. The vast majority of exercises they do are slow speed exercises, which require you to use the clutch, otherwise the bike will stall. Also, new riders are taught to pull in the clutch in any sketchy situation just to avoid that whiskey throttle event which we talked about earlier. It works great at the very beginning, but later we should drop this habit and use the clutch only when we need it, not just in every possible situation. And the last but not least, the nemesis of all beginner sport bike bras, the twitchy throttle. Unlike cars, motorcycles on average have a pretty high power-to-weight ratio, which means even small abrupt movements on the throttle can have a big impact on how the bike behaves. When we are too rough with the throttle, the bike's power delivery also acts pretty snappy, which makes the bike unstable and harder to control. For example, snapping the throttle open suddenly can cause the rear tire to lose traction, leading to a skid and low side crash. Even worse, if the rear tire regains traction suddenly after skidding, it can snap the bike upright in violent motion, throwing the rider off. This is called a high side. And we definitely don't want to be on the receiving end of one of those. On more powerful bikes, jerky throttle can produce even more epic results, like uncontrolled unintentional wheelies and even looping. Good throttle control is a key to smooth and safe riding. We want to roll on and off the throttle smoothly, like we are turning a dial, not flicking an on and off switch. By being smooth on the throttle, we will instantly have better control of the bike's power and prevent it from doing something sudden and unexpected. And guys, that's it for today! Thank you for watching this video. If you like it, smash the thumbs up button to appease the gods of YouTube. Check out our courses if you wish to improve your riding skills and become safer and more confident rider. Ride safely and have a wonderful day! Bye!